All right, welcome back, everybody, to our Chai with Coaches live stream. My name is Juby Harrell. I'm here with my co-host.
Naheed Oberfeld, nice to see everybody today.
Yeah, it's a hot one outside there right now on the East Coast. I think we are at 88 right now, Naheed said. Um, yeah, my dog does not want to go outside for too long because he's spoiled and also loves cold weather. So there's that. But um, yeah, welcome back. I'm glad you guys could join us today, and hopefully you guys are having a good week. My week's been pretty good, really busy, but pretty good overall. Naheed, how's your week been going?
I'm beginning to relax a little bit, take a little bit of time off, and do some of again, go back to my foundation. So today has been a busy week, but the week itself has been pretty laid back for me.
Nice. That's good to have those once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
So, so last time we talked about money, and it was a pretty good deep dive into that. If you guys haven't checked that out, please check out that on our last stream on the video. Today we're talking about fear, and how fear can affect business and how fear can affect success as a whole. And you know, with you talked about fear, I like to talk about scarcity mindset and greed and all these kind of things that feed into fear. Because a lot of things in reality, it's just they're two real strong emotions, and it's either love or fear, right? Those are the two strong ones. And I use love very, very broadly to mean things you care about, things you desire, things you're going after, like your goals. Or you have fear, which are things you're running from. So either you're running towards something or away from something, right? It's the motivation idea. And so when people have these fears and have these things that are holding them back, Naheed, when you talk to your clients, what are some ways you help them with that? And I'll talk about my approach in a second, but I want to hear more about your view on fear and kind of how you deal with that.
Something that I've known for a while, but I'm kind of getting back to my foundations of biopsychology. And fear is an emotion. It's a very strong emotion. So, what's the difference between an emotion and a feeling? Is that the emotion triggers a whole body response. So, that's when your cortisol level starts rising. That's when your palms begin to sweat. There's a neurological response. There's blood stuff that's getting pumped through our blood. So, the primary thing really is to first understand what's going on in your body and why fear is such a strong emotion. And that's because it's not just an emotional thing, it's not just a mental thing, it includes that physical response. So
Yep.
I will start by saying that when I talk to people about fear, the first question I ask them is, where do you feel it in your body?
Mm-hmm.
And my reason for doing that is because sometimes, not sometimes, we get too much into the mental space, too much into the emotional space. I want to take them out of that space for a moment and connect with their body for a moment. So that's really my foundation and where I'm actually starting from. Where do you feel it in your body? And then we start going a little bit deeper into understanding, okay, what's that message in that area in your body, and you got to use your imagination here, but your subconscious is all about imagination. So what's that message inside of that fear? And then we can start unpacking what's truly going on, because it's never what people think at the surface. It's always a lot deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and to touch on a couple of things you mentioned, one is the body piece of it, right? Which is like somatic coaching. That's the area of coaching people talk about is somatic coaching. It's coaching through the body. And when you're stuck in your head, you can't really feel, right? You can't
Mhm.
focus on what's going on. So that's a great way to get people out of their heads and stop overthinking things and just kind of focus on what they're feeling, what sensations they're feeling in their body, right? Because you'll have some sensations going on for you. You'll have ideas in your head that are kind of holding you back. But when you get out of that and start looking at your body, like, oh, I really feel it in my chest, or I really feel it in my arms, or I feel it in my shoulders. Sometimes people feel it in their heads. They actually get headaches from how much fear or stress that they're under. But the other thing that I do a lot of, I do some of the somatic stuff as well when it makes sense. And I think for me, it's another thing I do like to do with people is look at the way that they process the fear, right? And language is a really powerful way to process fear. And people often, and we talked about this right before the stream started, but people use the word trigger a lot, right? Oh, that triggered me, or that made me feel like I was triggered by this whole thing, and they overuse it, right? Yes, there are actual trauma triggers that people do, encounter here and there. However, at the same time, not everything is a trigger. Not everything is that powerful. However, however, if you keep calling something a trigger, it will become a trigger because our language is that much more powerful it's a lot more powerful than people think it is, right? So calling something a trigger makes that thing a trigger for you after a while. Maybe not the first time, maybe not the 10th time, But the 100th time you call that thing a trigger, you don't even notice when you're doing it. And it's suddenly like, oh my God, it's so much, it's so bad. It's so scary. It's paralyzing. And for me, fear, one great example for fear for me is I'm afraid of heights, right? And I've recently taken up climbing, rock climbing, to overcome that fear intentionally, because and we talked about the desensitization idea, right? But desensitization is nothing more than just showing you what's on the other side of fear. Because often we make up these ideas of these monsters, these things that are just like, you make fear bigger than it is. You make fear this insurmountable, crazy, scary monster that you're like, oh my God, there's no possible way that I could possibly face this thing and overcome it. And then when you actually do it, suddenly like, oh wait, that was it. Like, I mean, I don't know about you, Naheed, but when I was in school, I had these exams, right, that I was terrified. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to fail this exam. It's the worst thing in the world. This class is so hard. This essay is so difficult. And insert experience here is the worst thing in my life. And it's so scary. It's so crazy. And then fast forward even a year later or 6 months later, I'm like, oh yeah, that wasn't that bad. I'm still alive. I'm still here. And you got through the other side of it. And I said this on another stream before, but we're talking about like, Will Smith, and I forgot who originally said it, but the idea is what's on the other side of fear. It's probably what you want, right?
Yeah, everything that you say sounds so logical, but fear is such a strong emotion
Mm-hmm.
that some people get paralyzed in the being stuck. So I'm talking to a
Yep.
client, she's 21 years old, and it's the same thing. We've been talking about it, her fear of stepping forward, and finally said, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Because what tends to happen is we make this thing so big by talking and talking and talking. Now what would have started as a small little emotion has turned into this full blown, I absolutely cannot move beyond this type of thing.
Yep.
We're not talking rocket science. I wanted her to get a resume put together, right? There's nothing crazy that I was asking her to do. But the fear was that she was now growing up, right? And she's got exactly what you said, these expectations of what it means to grow up. And she's
Mm-hmm.
come up with some things that are something about gas prices and taxes. And I'm like, that's not what I think of when I was your age and I was thinking about growing up. I was like, freedom from my parents. I get to have my own place. I can make my own decisions. So it's really about how you perceive something. And you're right, most of the time, it really has nothing to do with the situation at hand. It was some past experience. You got a quote unquote negative result, and now your subconscious is just generalizing it in every area that it feels it can.
Absolutely. And we generate these rules, right? We create these like false rules, these false associations between feelings and between things that happen. And at different ages, one of them being, when you're a teenager or 21 or just, in transition times, you create these
Mm-hmm.
rules and you're saying to yourself, oh, well, every time I do X, this happens. Except it's not really every time. You've only done it one time. So it's not really, it's like your rule is one, right? That's not a very realistic or like effective statistical
One
analysis.
data point doesn't make
Yeah,
a line.
correct. You can't judge by statistics based on one sample size, right? Sample size is way too small. So, do it 100 times or 1,000 times, then let me know how it happened. But people don't end up doing that, right? And so you create these ideas in your head about how afraid you are of the future or of this thing that you've, this meaning you've made of this thing based on one or maybe even two data points, right? And then now you live your whole life with that rule that every time I, apply for a job, I won't get it. Or every time I, talk to that person, I won't be able to talk to them. Or every time I go through this marketing as a business owner, every time I go through this marketing process, or every time I talk to a customer and try to sell them or try to, offer my price, I won't get the price. I'll have to negotiate down or whatever it looks like. So for business owners specifically, fear is one of those things where it's crippling for business owners, but it's not crippling the same way. The way that the law looks at businesses or corporations is as entities, right? As a person, essentially. And honestly, it's kind of funny that it does that because the corporation actually operates like the human body in this way, because the leader is like the head of the business owner, whoever the owner is, the CEO. The person doing the policies is like the business owner. Oh, sorry, is the business owner is like the head of the brain of the operation. And if that brain is paralyzed, the whole organization is paralyzed.
Right.
And if you're afraid to spend money, if you're afraid to go out there and put your name out there and really go out there and spend money that you know you have to spend as a business owner, right? Then your business is not going to be successful because it's going to be paralyzed. You're paralyzing the whole business because of your own fear.
Yeah, as you were talking about fear, one of the things that I was thinking about is fear as a use of as an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Take all the really successful people, whatever, whomever you consider to be your idols in let's just use very traditional forms of success, whether it's sports, whether it's business, it really doesn't matter. We see them, but we don't see the steps that they did to get there. In other words, if you are a business person, they probably started doing coaching at a much earlier age than or stage in their business career than they are today. In fact, most executives have done some level of coaching, and I think they find it very beneficial. So we use fear as an excuse to keep us stuck in the status quo, right? And I like your idea where you're saying that you're overusing the word trigger, because what you're ending up not doing is actually identifying what's really underneath the fear. Like for me, fear has become a catch-all word.
Yep.
Fear of what? And I tell my clients, don't stay superficial. Specifically, what is that fear that you think is going to happen? I want you to get granular and detailed about it. And we tap in my session, and I start saying this stuff because I want them to stick with the negative. The one thing I hear over and over again, it sounds really stupid. As they say it over and over, they're like, yeah, that doesn't really make sense, does it? I'm like, no,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't.
Yeah, and that sounding really stupid thing that when they say it out loud, that's when it makes sense to them. But you don't get there until you dive deeper, like you said, because it's like, oh, I'm afraid of heights. Okay, are you really afraid of heights or are you afraid of falling? Oh, I'm afraid of falling. Actually, that's a good distinction. Okay, cool. What happens if you fall? Well, I'll die. Okay, but you're attached to a rope. Oh yeah, you're right.
Right,
Like it's one of
exactly.
those things where it's just like it doesn't necessarily make sense, but we have these things in our heads, and unless we take a step back and examine them and look at them, the same thing is true for business owners, right? It's like, okay, you're afraid of spending money. Great. Okay, what happens if you don't spend money? Let's say you don't market your business at all. Pandemic happened. You're afraid of spending money on marketing. You don't want to market. Let's say you don't spend money on marketing. What happens? Well, my name doesn't get out there. Okay, what happens when your name doesn't get out there? Well, I guess I can't make sales. I can't get clients. Okay, so if you can't get clients, you can't get sales. What's the result? Well, I don't get clients, I don't get money. Okay, so then what happens? Your business fails. Great. So because you're afraid of your business failing because you're spending too much money, you're going to not spend any money, and then your business is going to fail because of that.
Mhm.
So which one would you rather do? Would you rather 100% chance your business fails because you don't spend any money to advance your business, to market it, to get it out there? Or would you rather a 50% chance, worst case 50% chance, that your business fails because you spent money and got your name out there, maybe got a couple clients out of it?
Yeah, so when you talk about that scenario, when somebody comes to me in front of me with a very similar scenario, they want to hire and they're afraid to, they're afraid to hire. What I tell them is what they're really telling me, not so much the fear, there's a trust issue. I don't
Mm-hmm.
trust myself, right? And again, until you get a little bit deeper, you don't even think about that. And then you go, okay, so I don't trust myself. Why is it that I don't trust myself? Because of that one time. I'm like, okay, so you had this scenario one time. Was every time this scenario? Because then that's a pattern, and we have to start looking to see what's that energy pattern that's continuing this same scenario over and over again. And if not, what about other scenarios? Maybe not like a direct hire, but something else where you've done kind of like a JV type of thing where you partnered and you found the right person to support you in different places. How did that work out?
Mm-hmm.
Because we do tend to take one isolated event and then we extrapolate into something so much bigger. And as soon as you get clarity on this kind of stuff, all of a sudden you're like, okay, so I don't trust myself, which is a totally different issue with being afraid of failure, which is what everybody spews out on a regular basis. So then let's work on trusting yourself, right?
Right.
Because then you can actually get to a place where you can say, all right, now I can relax. Now I'm going to take this risk. It's a calculated risk, but it's not going to be the end of the world one way or the other.
Right. And even that trust, if you delve deeper into trust, if you don't trust someone, it's like that still comes down to fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're afraid of being hurt, or afraid of this happening again, or afraid of something happening there, right? And then that feeds that, it feeds itself. It's a cycle. It's a downward spiral. If you keep feeding that fear, it will keep getting worse and worse. And one of those things that we try to do is as coaches to kind of break those patterns, right? Identify the patterns so you can break it. If you don't take time to actually sit down and identify those patterns and see, these are all the places where fears held me back in the past, or this particular fear, or this particular rule that I've created, this fake rule, right, that I've created has held me back in the past. And until you take time to look at that, you don't ultimately know how to deal with it. You can't actually, move forward, move past that. So it's one of those things where you working with someone to talk about this, talking through this stuff is actually extremely helpful. But it depends on if you're willing to have that discussion, because the other side of it is that sometimes the people who are super insecurity again is another form of fear. It's fear of being wrong, fear of being not competent, fear of being
Judged.
different things, judged or whatever. Yeah, right, exactly. Fear of being judged. What are people going to say? Right? Insecurity is one of the biggest forms or most common forms of fear. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are insecure can end up being leaders of some sort, right? And that is like a recipe for disaster right there. And those are people who are not going to seek help, right? They're the ones who are out there who are not going to ever try to hire a coach or try to talk to someone about it, or even go to their manager, someone who's supposed to be helping to develop them. They're not going to go to their managers. They're not going to go to people because they're afraid of looking bad, right? They're so insecure about what they're able to do or not able to do that they're afraid of getting help, because they're like, oh, I should know this, so I can't possibly ask for help on this. But that eliminates authenticity, it eliminates vulnerability, it destroys the possibility of them being a good leader, it destroys communication, and it hinders them being able to be competent at what they do.
Right. And their own personal growth. I mean, can you imagine if you're going to be stuck in that same place because you're too afraid to in any way show that there's place for improvement within you? So yeah, I mean, fear is one of those things that is so all-encompassing. We all feel it at various points in our life, but it is, I think, a mark of personal responsibility, right, for ourselves, for the community, for our business, however you want to look at it, where we are willing to say, not every fear in the world, okay, like we probably have dozens, and nobody's going to go out and touch snakes and rats and those types of things, but it just it robs us of our peace of mind, it robs us of our sense of self-worth, it robs us of our sense of well-being. So who wants to live in this tiny little cage, because that's really what we're doing, and then the more we think about our fears, that cage it constricts more and more and more. I'm sure there's some kind of movie reference about people being stuck with things Raiders of the Lost Ark or something, right? I mean, all those Egyptian things, tombs that
There's a
are
couple of them. Egyptian, not
okay.
Egyptian, but that yeah. That's
Oh, Raiders of
close,
the Lost
close.
Ark is not okay. No, then which one is the one? There was some Egyptian one. I'm sure there was one of them in there. But the
Petra.
point
It was
being,
Jordan. It was Petra. But yeah, sure. Go ahead.
so I will stop with my movie references.
Yeah, just stick with what you're good at, which is the non-movie reference. I'll do the movie references. You do the non-movie references. Let's do that.
All right. Or at least I'm not going to try to name anything. How about that one? But the point is, we are literally restricting our lives and we're destroying our own enjoyment in the process.
Right.
I had tons of fear, by the way. Can I just say that right up front?
So do I. Absolutely.
When I quit my job, however many years ago, it was 10 years ago, I had no clue what my next step was. And all I did was be afraid of what that next step was going to look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, there's ton of fear. There's tons of fear that I have. I mean, like fear of heights is one of them, right? But I have a bunch of other fears that just don't make sense a lot of times, but they're still there. And I try to like even the fear of heights one doesn't make sense. That's why I'm trying to overcome it, right? And so in terms of movie references, the one that comes to mind actually is Star Wars, the first one, before they went to shit. Star Wars, the first movie, A New Hope, they're stuck in the trash compactor, and it keeps going closer and closer and closer together. And ultimately, actually, it's a perfect metaphor because they have to reach out to C-3PO, who's outside of the situation, to help them, which is ultimately what happens when you're stuck in your own fear and it's compressing you. You need to get outside help, right? You need to get yourself outside of the situation as much as possible and look at things from the outside and say, okay, well, what can we actually do to get this thing resolved or figure this thing out and move past it? And they were able to do that because they, again, sought outside help. Now, some people may ultimately be able to do stuff on their own, and that's totally fine. I'm not saying this is for everybody, that everybody has to seek outside help for this. But if you're having trouble with this, even if you're insecure, talk to somebody about it. Confide in that person and be able to find those resources, those mentors, coaches, managers, friends, even, as long as they're relatively competent and mean well for you, they'll be able to at least be that ear to listen to what you're saying and give you that feedback. But they have to be able to be willing to give you that tough feedback, and you have to be able to receive it as well. Because a lot of times, that's not my dog this time.
That's my dog that never barks, by the way.
For once, Hachi's being quiet. I mean, I'm surprised. I'm shocked. Mailman came early, I guess. But no, it's one of those things where you seek out outside help and you do what you can, do the best you can. But in order to get through some of these fears, you have to seek outside help and understand that you have to be willing to listen, and they have to be willing to tell you. So it's a two-sided affair every single time.
Yeah, and I'm going to push back a little bit, and I'm going to say seek outside help regardless. Because fear is one of those types of things where it's so insidious until somebody who is trained to be, and I'm not a big believer in that you have to have this training and this certification, but somebody who is trained with some kind of process that is proven to be effective, they will help you go down these rabbit holes, because I guarantee you, I bet you that you're going to notice that these fears are actually cropping up in multiple areas in your life. It's usually not just one area in our life, because that's how our subconscious is. It generalizes, right? It's already taken one event from when you were 2 years old, and it's now moving that forward for the rest of your life. So as somebody who does both personal and professional coaching for myself, I would say take a little bit of time and get to know you. You're going to learn so much about yourself in this process. And the main thing that people come to me when they're hesitant, one is they feel like coaching or therapy is going to be incredibly painful. It doesn't have to be. But the second thing that they say is that they're afraid that they're going to see things inside of them that they're not going to like. I can guarantee you that if you go to a good coach or a therapist, you're going to see things inside of you that you're going to be blown away. And that's on the positive side, not the negative side.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll be able to recognize the amazing stuff within you. You'll also be probably confronted with stuff you may not want to see, but ultimately it will be for your benefit. And you'll also be able to realize that, hey, this is stuff that's actually been holding you back, and you'll suddenly be unlimited in your ability to do things. But to Naheed's point, absolutely. I mean, there is a strong, I'm not a big certification guy either. Frankly, a lot of them don't make sense. But unfortunately, there are also a lot of fake certifications out there that just so that's another reason why I'm just not a big fan of it. But when you're looking at someone, look at someone who's trained in how to actually deal with these things, and how to actually, because you're in these conversations, you're going to open up some old wounds sometimes. Mm-hmm. And you have to talk to someone who knows how to deal with that, and also knows how to effectively close them and sanitize them properly, just like a regular wound. You don't want to get gangrene in your head. Okay. It's not something you want to get in your mind. It's not going to help you. It's actually going to hurt you eventually, because it could actually become a trigger if they don't know how to deal with it properly. And that's where you want to be able to overcome those things effectively.
I think this is a great time to actually mention a couple of things that you might tell your friends. Say your friends are looking for a coach, and what would be some of the questions that or therapist, doesn't matter, but what would be some of the things that you would coach them on talking about, or questions to ask if they were going out and having a conversation with other therapists, if they were interviewing them to say, hey, is this a good fit? I'll give you some of mine, but why don't you give some of yours?
Yeah, I actually wrote an article recently about this on Forbes, believe it or not. So this exact conversation. But some questions you want to ask them might be things like, okay, how have you helped people like this in the past? Mm-hmm. But let me back up. Even before you get to the point of talking to a coach, right? If you're talking to someone and you know a coach, or you want to refer a coach, you want to refer one of your friends to a coach, ways to bring that up actually might be a little better, because sometimes people need that extra push to go talk to somebody. And having that friend to be able to tell you, hey, listen, you might want to talk to somebody about this, or is this something you're open to talking about with someone? Is this something that you want to talk to a coach about? Or maybe you might want to consider, there's a couple different ways to do that, right? But gauge if they're open or not. And if they're not open, encourage them to. If they really are not open to it, then there's nothing else you can do at that point, because people can just show you the door. You have to open it yourself. But that also means that they're probably not ready to have a coach, because sometimes you got to be coachable to have a coach, right? Or a therapist for that matter. You have to be coachable. You have to be open to getting feedback and trying new things and figuring out what makes sense for you. If you're not open to those avenues, then there's no point in even having those conversations, because you're going to waste your money, you're going to waste your time, and you're going to waste the coach's time.
And you're going to get frustrated, and then you're going to blame either yourself or the coach.
Or the coaching in general. Like, oh, coaching doesn't work.
Yeah, that coach doesn't work for me. None of this works for me. I'm
Right.
uncrackable. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely a great thing. And, there are different ways to approach that. But I'll tell you something that I used with a family member some time ago. And I was like, you know what? I see you in so much pain. It really hurts me. And there's nothing I can do about this. I, I really recommend that you find somebody to be able to talk to and help you through this. Because guess what? Otherwise, 1 year later, we'll be having the same conversation, and I turned it into me. It really makes me feel stuck and helpless to help you.
Mm-hmm. That's a
And
great one.
that somehow resonated. And it was not pre-planned. It just came out of me when I was having this conversation.
That's a great way to do it. I like that a lot, because it also ultimately lets people know there's not just an impact on you. You think that this is an isolated thing, right? Human dynamics are never isolated. You always have other people that are impacted by your choices, by how you deal with things, everything. Again, this thing, I did have a conversation yesterday on this panel, and one of the things we talked about was the effect of coaching in an organization, right? If you coach one person in a 100-person organization, it's not just changing that one person's life; it's changing everybody that they touch in that organization. So the higher up you go, the more influence they have, the bigger that change in the organization is going to be. And that's the case with any individual, right? If they have people that they interact with on a daily basis. I've had clients, wives who've called me and been like, what did you guys work on? Because he's totally different. Like, he's amazing. It's like he's much more insightful or whatever. And I'm like, hey, I'm happy to hear that. That's fantastic. He's doing work. It's not just me. Like, he's doing the work, which is fantastic. And that's powerful. But I love what you said, because it lets people know that the impact that their fear is having is on not just them, but people around them as well. Because I guarantee you it is. If you look at at the impact of things that are happening in your life, they're definitely going to have impacts on people around you, your friends, your family, your children, your parents. There's impacts all around.
Yeah. So, do you have a question, a statement, or an introduction that people that can use to be able to say, "Hey, look, I really suggest that you give this a try, or really look into something like this."
Yeah, I mean, from one friend that I was talking to, I was like, how's this impacting you right now? How would your life be different if it was, if this was not in your way, right? And they told me that they described the situation that actually sounded a lot happier. I'm like, listen, you sound so much happier talking about that life.
Mm-hmm.
I would highly recommend you talk to somebody to get that life for yourself and create that life for yourself, right? Because that's really what it is. It's creating the life that you want. It's creating the future that you want. And you can do that by working with someone and getting through that fear, because sometimes you can't even see that life, right? There's some things there's some situations you can't even see past, because the fear is, you built that fear up so strong in your head. There's like, I don't even know what the world looks like outside of this little cage that you're talking about, Naheed, right? You've only seen the world through those cage bars, and you don't know what it looks like outside of that. And that's limiting, extremely limiting.
Yeah, I mean, talk about freedom's killing, and we are supposed to be living in a freedom-filled world, at least in our country, for the most part. Let's just say that. It's our minds. Our minds are the biggest cages, more than anything else.
100%. So we're coming up on time, but I hope that was a good discussion for folks. And we didn't even mention if folks have put stuff in the chat, but if you guys were watching and have ideas you want to throw in the chat, we can feel free to do that, and we can come back afterwards in the comment section. But hope you guys enjoyed the video today. Any last minute thoughts you want to throw out there before we end the stream today?
Yeah, you always ask me that, and I always come up with something. And here's the thing: what you are afraid of today, imagine that 10 years from now, and throughout those 10 years, and is that the kind of life? It's very similar to what you said. For the next 10 years, is that the life you want to be able to see yourself living with your kids, your family, or your dog, whatever it happens to be? And then don't you think you owe it to yourself to say, it doesn't have to be that way?
Yeah. And I'll take that a little further. I'll say, every time every year that goes by, you get more and more set in your ways. Wouldn't you rather be set in good ways rather than ways that hold you back? So that's one of the things that fear does. Fear holds you back, and your brain patterns are gonna be built around fear as opposed to otherwise. So
Absolutely.
love that. Awesome.
I
Well, thank
loved
you guys
this
so much.
conversation. I just want to say It was
No, it's
helpful
great.
for me to you. Me
No,
too.
I think it was great for me as well. And like I said, talking about this stuff is really powerful around fear and like the ideas around it. But again, like notice for those of you watching, notice how you felt in your body when you thought about your fear, right? Notice where you're feeling it. What are you feeling? Describe it exactly, and take some time to write it down if you can. And that can be really powerful to look at that and kind of look back at where else you felt that in your life. And when you notice that feeling in the future, know that that's probably the same kind of feeling. So thanks again, guys, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, like, hit the like button, hit subscribe, share this with someone who might be crippled by fear right now, or might just be dealing with it on some level, and who it might help, or someone you just want to share it with. So take care. Tune in again in a couple weeks. We'll be talking about something else, and we'll let you guys know what that's going to be closer to the video. But yeah, it's always a good time, Naheed. Thanks for joining again, and we'll actually get some chai in here at some point, so we'll do that. Okay, I have water today. Whatever, that's fine.
Every
Fine.
day matters.
Agreed. 100%. Make today matter, guys. Take care.
There you go.